Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. We get sent a wide variety of questions on the podcast, but many of them seem to evolve around this concept of what essential tools do firefighters need to build to ensure they have successful, well-rounded careers, but also while ensuring they remain fit, adaptable, and capable leaders on the job. We're going to be exploring some of my favorite topics with Nick today, certainly around self-discipline and self-leadership, that foundation of a successful firefighter, because that career begins with self-leadership. A firefighter must learn to lead themselves before they can effectively lead others. This requires maintaining personal discipline throughout continuous learning, self-improvement, and of course, accountability. We're going to talk about motivation and goal setting, identifying your personal motivations. Why did you get into the job? Goals are critical for professional growth. Knowing what success looks like and knowing what development looks like for you. A successful firefighter is someone who always continues to seek knowledge and strives to improve. On that note, we're going to talk about continuous learning and training, and also speak about a new concept I'd heard with Nick, firematics. This is the practical aspects of firefighting. This includes grasping core concepts like the size up, fire behavior, building construction, and effectively strategy and tactics, and the whole wider holistic concept of how we apply that on the job. We also go into subjects around adaptability, a little bit around flexibility. Firefighters must be able to adapt quickly to changing scenarios. This includes being open to learning new skills, getting out of your comfort zones, and listening to others to make sure you're making those better decisions during those emergency situations. Adaptability is a key trait and enhances our operational effectiveness. And of course, a common theme throughout the podcast, and certainly throughout January, is this physical and mental fitness. Fitness is a fundamental requirement for firefighters. Maintaining physical and mental fitness through regular exercise, proper nutrition, flexibility, and recovery ensures firefighters can endure the physical and emotional stresses of the job. We're also going to be touching on some peer support, some teamwork, embracing failure, and again, a lot around leadership development. Nicholas is a firefighter and district training officer in New Jersey, USA, as well as a state level 2 fire instructor, a national Fallen Firefighters Foundation state advocate, and a member of the board of directors of the 5-Alarm Task Force. He's also the founder and contributor of the Firehouse Tribune website, which you can find in the links to today's episode. They teach critical thinking and fireground decision making. As I've already alluded to, Nick is the host of the 5-Tool Firefighter podcast and wrote the book 5-Tool Firefighter, which you can get a link to go off and buy it if you want to. That is in the links below as well. This is a podcast and book designed to help build firefighters to their highest potential on and off the fireground. And he's got a co-host of Station Talk with Chief Marciano, that's Tom Marciano, where they discuss topics that affect the fire service. You can get a link to that podcast in our notes as well. The 5-Tool Firefighter is a really quick, easy read. It's 100 pages of a book that helps firefighters perform at their highest level. And it's a companion book, the 5-Tool Firefighter Tactical Workbook. There is so much to get into in today's episode. So without further ado, please welcome Nicholas J. Higgins. I'll see you on the other side. What is some of the common things people get wrong when they think about a career in the fire service?
That it's not Hollywood, They think it's easy. They think anybody can do it. I've heard people say, I'm not scared of fire. I've heard people say, I'm fit to do this job. I'm an athlete. I'm a CrossFitter. They think it's easy. They don't realize how much you have to sacrifice. And I think that, to me, is something that people have to understand. You have to sacrifice things in your life. And you have to have that discipline to understand that it's not going to be all good days. You're going to do good things at the expense of having to deal with bad things, because we're not getting called to somebody's good day. We're calling because somebody either did something stupid or somebody needs us at their worst possible time.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Godiva Limited. Godiva is one of the world's leading providers of specialist equipment for emergency services market. Renowned for innovation, quality and reliability, Godiva produces a comprehensive range of fire pumps, including vehicle-mounted, portable, and their cutting-edge integrated total water flow control system, SAMFlows. I've been using Godiva my entire career as a reliable pump on the fireground. It is such a crucial element of a successful firefighting team that you want to empower your crews with the very best, reliable, quality product. Reach out to our partners by checking the notes in the podcast. Now back to the show. I always say most people will never ring the emergency services, never ring 999, they never ring 911. And the one day that they do,
you will become part of that story. They'll go, oh, this guy came, what's he fucking Nick? And he did this or he did that. And you will be, for all intents and purposes, you might be the only representation of a firefighter they have in their entire life. You are the representation of thousands of colleagues all over the world. You're that guy. You're that person. So you're only going to have to do it very, very infrequently, those real moments. But that's when I also think about like military versus fire service, because people moan that the fire department, the fire service aren't as busy as we used to be. And you hear it, don't you? I'm sure everyone has the stories of the good old days. You should have joined back in the 80s, should have joined back in the 90s. And I'm sure people will say it about this generation as well. But I'm like, in the UK, you're still averaging, in my personal experience, 4 or 5 calls every single shift. That's in the quieter stations. Now you go into the London Fire Brigades and stuff like that, you're talking in the 20s. Now again, not all of those will be working jobs, they won't be working calls, but you're still very busy. And I sort of liken that to the military, where I think about how much we aspire to be like the military. We talk about their discipline, we talk about their regimen, we talk about their drills and tactics. Less than 15% of the military will ever deploy to a conflict zone. And even of the ones that deploy, most of it will be admin, logistics, it will be all kinds of stuff. They won't be the ones at the tip of the sword involved in the conflict. So it's really very small, like 3%, 2% are ever actually going to do the thing. If you're a firefighter, you're actually very likely to do the thing. But people tend to moan about the infrequency of what we do and use that as an excuse not to hold themselves accountable to that high level. Obviously, as we were talking before we came on, and we sort of put it in the intro, you wrote the 5-Tool Firefighter. And this is a book that, because there's not actually many great books out there for people coming into the service. We actually haven't really got any in the UK. I mean, there was a book about Red Watch. And then there was London's Burning, which was a TV series a long time ago. But there's not really much in the UK that's written in a, I want to say like an aspirational or motivational and encouraging manner, because there's something about the UK that we're very self-deprecating. We have this stiff upper lip thing, and we don't have the same. I'm going to talk from a British perspective here. We would say we don't have the same rah-rah high five that the Americans have. And we say that as like a zing, like we're zinging people, like we're zinging the Americans, we're zinging you, to say it that way. And I'm like, I hear it differently. And I'm like, you mean we don't celebrate each other? Why don't we have the same level of self-belief? I was reading something recently about the UK has something like one of the top 3 or 4 universities, 2 of the top 3 or 4 universities in the world, them being Oxford and Harvard, not Oxford, Harvard's in America, Oxford and Cambridge. But of those business schools, we create significantly less entrepreneurs, even though we're one of the top universities in the world. And I think that is inherently to do with our blueprint and our self-beliefs and the story that we tell ourselves and our optimism and our encouragement. Like if you came into a station tomorrow and go, hey, dude, I've just got promotion. I'm just going lieutenant over on station wherever. I would like to think, and please call bullshit if I'm wrong, people will go, Nick, fucking hell, man, that's awesome. High five. Or if you run a business and you're like, dude, I just got a 50K bonus. They'd be like, fuck yeah, man, let's go and get some beers. Let's do this. Over in the UK, it'd be like, oh, bit full of yourself, eh, Nick? Pride comes before a fall. Oh, it's good to be you. You wouldn't share it. And like, so that's a big ass long, there's 27 questions in there. This is my ADHD brain taking us on a fucking roundabout. I apologize. But like, yours is one of the books that we send to people. Not as in we send the PDF that you've shared with me, as in we send the links to it on Amazon, because we're not doing this stuff in the UK. And why do you think Americans are so much more patriotic? I see you guys, you wear it on your shirts, you have your names on your trucks. You seem to be prouder of yourselves and each other.
It's funny because I actually had this conversation with a Canadian firefighter a few years ago.
Okay.
I have some friends up in Canada, and I was teaching a class, and he goes, you American firefighters are so proud and boastful. Like you got so much pride in being a firefighter. And
I love that though.
I just couldn't help but laugh.
Or is it not the case?
Oh, no,
is it because
it
we
is.
only see you? Like, we only see you type of American, because you're the sort of people that come and do these podcasts,
Right.
and we're not going to get a negative pessimist coming on to do podcasts, are we? So it's like...
Absolutely, because the people that are doing the podcast, people that are doing these books, like you hit it on the head. Like, the American Fire Service is saturated with books. I mean, they're saturated with leadership books, and military books, and everything that has to do with this, because I just think that we just have this thing where we never let go of our history of where the fire service came from. It came from our founding fathers and Benjamin Franklin. And we still keep that tradition alive. Like, each firehouse in our country, and even my firehouse, has deep history into something that had to do with the cultivation of America in some way at some point in our history. And we don't.
But with respect, we have the same. So that's not a valid excuse
for
us.
Get it.
Because you, with the greatest respect, and let's call bullshit on each other, like, you stole all of our policies and procedures. But also there's a bigger thing here. So let's zoom right back.
Okay.
And I read this on something around. So America was, what's the word I'm looking for? The people that live in America, obviously Native Americans aren't the population of America, unfortunately, anymore. It's people that came over from the UK.
Yes, UK.
And I think to myself, that is an unknown filter that even happened there, because when they're like, okay, we're going to go, who was it? I can't remember the guy. I'll have to Google it in a minute. Was it Napoleon? I can't remember. I'm probably wrong. Was Napoleon? No, it was, who went over? Anyway, he's like, we're going to go over.
John Smith.
We don't quite know where we're going. We're not sure what it's going to be like. And I remember seeing one of the adverts. It was like, we want uncommon men who are going to be resilient. It's going to take months at sea and all this sort of stuff. The pessimists would have naturally gone, fuck that.
Exactly.
That sounds like a stupid idea. So the only people that went were the naive optimists with a high risk appetite who wanted adventure. So the people that are part of your bloodline, and again, the multiculturalism, the bloodline's probably all over the place if we did the family tree thing, but you're explorers, you're optimists. I mean, call bullshit on that. Does that make sense? I feel like that's probably where your heritage is. You're the people that went outside the cave and over the hill.
Exactly what it is.
We didn't.
That's what it is. We just went out there and we just took over.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
Yeah, that's it, brother. You're the adventurers. You're carrying the spear. You're getting out there and doing it. And that's so inspiring, but you're so much prouder of your first responders. When I see the ceremonies and the line of duty deaths, and I mean, it's tragic when you see the stuff after 9/11, but the way that you responded to that, because we've had our Grenfells, we've had our Manchester Arena bombings, we've had our 7/7 bombings in London, and it just gets forgotten tomorrow, or it feels that way. I'm sure for many it has not been the case, but it feels that way. Like, I've been to Ground Zero. It's harrowing, and it just hits. It's eerie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was there a few years after, maybe 2-3 years after. It was goosebumps, hair standing up on you, and just it's different, especially, we just had.
But Mickey Farrell's from FDNY, runs Top Floor Tactics, and he personally feels that he's like, no, they've forgotten about it. I'm like, dude, have they? I don't know. I don't live there, but I still feel like you're much more looked after than we are.
In a sense, people forgot about it. With the way this country has changed over the last so many years, politically, I think people have forgotten about it or just don't care. But for us, myself, my department, because I'm only 40 minutes from the trade centers, so it's different because we witnessed it firsthand. We were around seeing it from the river, as they say, and we lived it. So for us, it's a different feeling than these generations coming in. They get it secondhand. They don't have that same feeling to it because a lot of them weren't born when this happened. So it's almost like hearing about Pearl Harbor or hearing about the Kennedy assassination. They feel it. We don't feel it as much as they did. I remember where I was that day. I remember who I was talking to. I remember the guy's name. I remember everything. So it's different, and that's why there's so much pride in everything. And I think that day really kind of sparked more of a patriotism and understanding what firefighters really do.
You seem to have an encouragement for operating at the highest level as well, like whether it's the Jockos of the world. Is there anybody really in the firefighter space? I mean, there's a lot of people in the firefighter space, but they don't seem to have reached that international acclaim, like the military and the SAS stuff and the Jockos and the there's a guy from the UK, Ant Middleton. He's doing Australia stuff now. The military seem to have leaned heavier into it, and honestly, I think we've got a better product. And even the police, like I just had somebody on from something called Channel 5 Interceptors in the UK, and it's a police show. It's a police car chase show, similar to what you have in America. You have loads of them, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
You have loads of them. We did a similar thing called Channel 5 Interceptors, and it was the biggest show on Channel 5, which is a big channel in the UK. And it's been their biggest show for years, and they do it on repeat on channels like Dave and other things. But again, with the greatest respect, some people love the police, some people hate the police.
Right.
Some people have very negative associations to the military. The fire service, the fire department, people are never annoyed to see us.
No.
But you guys, I mean, Chicago Fire's probably still running, and that's a huge show.
Yeah,
I have to cringe a little bit when I watch it. I love it, but
a little bit.
I do have to cringe a little bit, and it has to be, Hollywood, because otherwise people won't get it. But some of the stuff you watch, you go, that fucking wouldn't happen. But anyway, we don't have anything like that in the UK, and then we complain that why doesn't anyone want to join the fire service? So it takes me all the back to 5 Tool Firefighter. So this is 100 pages, a book that helps firefighters perform at their highest level. And what I love about it is kind of a companion book. It's like a tactical workbook, isn't it? Right. So how long into your career did you realize there was kind of a gap for something like this? And I also love the simplicity of it. So only 100 pages. It's very digestible. It's very deployable. This episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
It was actually something that kind of fell into place that wasn't supposed to be a book.
Aren't they always the best things?
Yeah, it was. I was.
Good stuff always happens like that.
Sitting through COVID, everything shut down. Talking to a buddy of mine, just kind of thinking about when I played baseball, and thinking about, I was reading baseball articles and just studying the game, and I'm like, well-rounded players. And the Anaheim Angels have a player, Mike Trout. He's my favorite player. He's actually from New Jersey. He's a 5-tool athlete. And I'm like, what's a 5-tool firefighter? How would you equate that into, how would I equate my passion into my other passion? How do I do that? So I was just kind of sitting down and I'm writing, here's 5 things I think every firefighter should aspire to do, focus on, and at a high level. And then I said, well, that's just my opinion. Well, what does other people think about this? And I put out a survey and I put down 10 different things. And I said, here's my 5. Nobody knew what it was. I didn't know who these people were, just anonymous survey. And waited a couple weeks, about a month maybe, and got it back. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write a research paper. These are 5 things that I think it should be, and just kind of break out those topics. And here is what the consensus said. And I'm thinking no one's going to pick these same exact 5 things. Well, when I closed it, I got it back. I did all the studying on it. I said, it's the same 5 that I picked, it kind of screwed me up a little bit. So I'm like, all right, well, let me just start writing. And I just would sit in my room, in my office. I'm not in my office today. My wife's in there on call. So I'm just writing down the summary of what I did. And that was the final chapter. And that's how it kind of came about. And I sent it to someone. He's like a good friend of mine, a retired fireman down in Florida. He actually edited the book for me. And he's like, you have a book. It's a book. Like, you wrote hundreds of pages. And I'm just like, well, I guess I did. So I put it together and published it. And that's really how it came about. And I just started breaking it down. And as I started talking about it and teaching it, I realized there's more to this than just a book. And starting to put it together and realized every piece of this is a full circle, because you can't have one without the other. As you talk about it, I didn't put that aspect into play until maybe 2 years down the road. I'm like, wait, you can't be a good firefighter if you're not a good leader. You can't be a good leader if you don't have good discipline. I didn't put that in my brain together when I wrote it, like the way I presented it. And that's just kind of how it all played out, on how I kind of put it together. I didn't realize what I was doing. I just kind of wanted to do a passion project.
Did this come before or after you'd started so you're a state level 2 fire instructor. You also do the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation.
Yes.
You work with the 5-alarm task force, and you've also done some really, really great stuff. We're going to put a link to obviously the Firehouse Tribune website. These elements of critical thinking for fire officers and around the fireground decision maker stuff. Did this help us connect the dots in terms of timeline? Were these elements that have manifested through working with other agencies and trying to put your experiences, your lived experience, into words? Because a lot of people talk about writing a book.
Yes.
I mean, Jesus, if I had a quid for every time someone said they're going to write a book, but I stopped saying it now because it's certainly something I'd like to do. We've got the cover, but Jesus Christ, brother, I admire you for the work this takes. It is not a quick process.
It was after everything that I've done with them. It came about years later, because that's when I finally was able to kind of put everything together and kind of understood the process a little bit more, having worked with different people that have wrote books, read more books. I didn't really like reading books. So when I started reading more books, I kind of had a baseline of what I can do, and just had this realization that I had to be me. Nobody else but me. I'm not the Firehouse Tribune. I'm just myself. I'm just Nick. And that's what the book's about.
I think your sort of book is the only books that are going to, and of course I'm screaming from my own bias here, but I only listen to audio now. And unless it's a small, tactical, deployable book, I'm not going to read it. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I listen to podcasts like you run the 5 Tool Firefighter podcast, but you also do Station Talk, which I think is really good because they're shorter, more digestible stuff. You still doing that with Tom Marciano?
Yes, we have another one coming out today, and then another one next week. Yeah, thermal imaging's next week, so it's a good one.
We just had Andy Starnes on.
That's my brother.
Dude,
my man.
He's so articulate.
I just talked to him.
He's got so much passion as well. He's got so many great analogies. He understands because he's also had a great personal journey with religion as well, hasn't he?
Yes.
That he knows we learn through stories.
Yeah.
And he's just got such a way of communicating this stuff. I love Andy. Really, really fantastic episode. I think that went out a few weeks ago for us. But unless it's short and deployable like this, podcasts and audiobooks, it's just the way that people learn now, isn't it? I think this is what makes me sad about a lot of it. We as much as we possibly can, we put out debriefs.
Right.
Then a bunch of American ones, then a bunch of UK ones. And often these are just a read. We take several articles and I map them over each other. I develop a timeline. I try and avoid putting my opinion anywhere. Just try and state the facts and just try and paint that story, because people aren't, unfortunately, going to go back and read those anymore because it's just not the way they learn. It's only through things like Station Talk that you do, where you're discussing those topics, those elements from the fireground that will really help people like nuggets, and they can listen to them again and again and again. It's sticky. It's when people are driving. And unless it is a short book, I just think people aren't going to use it anymore. So I want to go through each element of that you've sort of explored in the book. And total transparency, I have got it up in front of me as well. You were kind enough to provide one for us. We are going to put a link for people to go and purchase themselves. It's not expensive, folks, and it's a really useful small thing that you can actually have in your kit bag. Have it on the trucks when you're stuck at the stack fire, when you're stuck at the turning over and damping down. You sat there for hours sitting on a job, babysitting it before fire investigation gets there. This is a lovely thing to have in there, and so I strongly recommend it. But I want to go through, because terms like firematics, which is one of the elements we're going to discuss today, will be foreign to people. But we kick it off with the first and sometimes most important element around leadership. And it reminded me of Lao Tzu. I'm not sure, have you got the Lao Tzu quote in there?
Yes, I got that.
I'm not sure if it came out of your book, because I'd certainly read it before. I'm not sure if I got it from the Book of Rings or from The Art of War.
It's in The Art of War.
But it's in The Art of War, isn't it? Mastering others is strength. Mastering oneself is true power. Like, before you can lead anybody else, you must be able to lead yourself.
Yes.
It's that element of self-leadership, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, that's how I end that chapter.
So unfold for us why you thought this was a non-negotiable to go in there.
Because you can't do anything without self-leadership or self-discipline. If you can't, and I got this from, I was in a class with a retired chief here. He has a book called Step Up and Lead, Battalion Chief Frank Viscuso of Kearney Fire Department. He's been all over the place as well. He said that, and it kind of resonated with me many years ago. And it kind of makes sense. If you can't lead yourself to do anything, you can't get up, you can't discipline yourself to work out, to read, to eat right, to spend time with your family, most importantly. You can't get to the next phase in your life. You can't get to the next step if you don't have some type of self-leadership. Motivation only goes so far. You can have motivation for an hour, a day, a week. It's going to fade off. But if you don't have leadership and discipline to have that structure in your life, and it's okay to have off days, but if you don't have that, you can't be good at your job, no matter what your job is.
Is there something wrong with the word discipline when we use it, though?
It's negative.
Because discipline has lots of negative connotations. People think of discipline as something that was imposed on them as a child by their parents. But I always say, if you don't impose discipline on yourself, life is going to impose discipline on you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I always say the harder you are on yourself, the harder you are on yourself, the easier life is on you.
Absolutely.
And that's not to beat yourself over the head every day and say, oh, I'm such a piece of shit, I'm not doing everything I said I'm going to do. But you've got to hold yourself accountable. Otherwise, like you say, you're just begging and hoping that motivation is going to show up.
Yep.
And most days it just doesn't. You know, you'll know this with the podcasting and stuff like that. It's like, it has to go out on Monday.
Yeah.
That is a non-negotiable. The new episode is going out on Monday.
Yeah.
And once you give yourself that must, because most things for people are shoulds, aren't they? It's like the old Tony Robbins thing. Yep. We just should all over ourselves. You know, I should work a bit harder. I should be a bit more accountable. I should save some more money. I should train a little bit more. I should. We just should all over ourselves. But transferring things into a must is really hard because it relies on that self-discipline.
Yes.
And for some people, life is just so hard, or they perceive it to be so hard, and perception is reality, that we feel like imposing more discipline on ourselves is just, they don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. How do you think people can transition into that element of self-discipline? Because it's an easy thing that we just say. Do you think you're born with it, or do you think you develop it?
I think it's both, depending on the person. But okay. I developed it. I didn't have it growing up. I didn't have it for many years. You know, I wouldn't want to do things that were hard. You know, I wouldn't take myself to that level. I just didn't want to. I wanted to have fun, you know. But as you get older, you start to realize that if you don't have any type of discipline, you don't have a purpose getting up every day. You don't have like you got to do something hard every day to challenge your brain. Because when you do that hard thing to challenge your brain, all that stuff around you is easy. Everything's around you easy. You know, I do cold plunges in my yard. I do it a couple times a week, not every day, but I'm trying. I
only do about 4 times a week. I've got a little chest freezer in the garage.
You got me beat. I do it twice. Twice. You know, you got to discipline yourself because you're not advancing your life. You're not advancing your career, and you're staying still. You're growing roots. You're becoming complacent. And that's the one thing firefighters hate is becoming complacent, because that's what kills you. And if you stay disciplined to doing certain things each day, like I want to read a book, or I want to listen to an audiobook on thermal imaging. Who's really going to want to do that? To be honest with you, you're not going to want to do it. I want to take the test to be the next. I want the promotional exam. You have to discipline yourself, which is structuring your day to do your job, to study, to spend time with your family if you have one, and to have a life. And if you can't sit down and paint that picture and mark up your calendar, as they say, I don't know what else to tell you. You're not gonna advance. You're not gonna succeed.
It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you. And we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time, resources, the team, and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, improve the visuals, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, by joining this, you'll not only support the future of the podcast, but also gain access to exclusive benefits. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, instant debriefs, and so much more. A growing collection of valuable resources to help you learn and grow. Now, I've only ever featured 200 episodes of the podcast on every free public available platform. You won't find the entire library because it is inside our Patreon. That is the full library legacy, and that is what you're joining for as well. So by joining the Patreon for just £3, you'll unlock everything we've ever created alongside discounts on merch like our coins, our hoodies, our patches, our tallies, and all the other stuff we're trying to crack on with doing on the podcast. Your support in whatever way, dropping it in the WhatsApp group, sharing it on the local newsletter, whatever it is, it's incredibly valuable, and we really do support it. And we need it to make it a long-lasting resource, that legacy resource we always talk about for first responders, firefighters, and everybody everywhere who's ever been interested in joining the fire service or who absolutely loves the job. Now, if you're already supporting something, as many people do, it's totally cool. You can still access the podcast for free, and you'll always be able to access all the new episodes for free. But we're asking for your help to make this sustainable. You can still listen, you can still join, you can still share it with your community. And if you want to do something free, follow us on our YouTube, subscribe to it, rate us on Spotify, whatever platform you listen to. We've reached nearly 1 million people with the podcast so far, which is just ridiculous. And we want to keep growing, we want to keep sharing the insights, and we want to keep showcasing the incredible work happening in our community and our sector every single day. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us. We'll see you on the other side. Do you have children, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought you did. How old are they?
Soon to be 6 and 1.5.
6. Did it align in any way to when your eldest was born?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Hit it right on the head.
Why do you think having kids is one of the best personal development hacks?
Because you're responsible for somebody else. You have this little innocent child, it's a baby growing up, and they're going to shape to the world the way you teach them, not what you tell them, but what you do with them and what you show them. Like, I could tell this kid, listen, man, you have to get up and play in the yard or do something. And he's going to see me sitting there scrolling on my phone. He ain't going outside. But if he sees me in the gym, or in my gym in the house, and he sees me exercising, he sees me outside, he sees my wife outside, he sees us doing those things, he's going to do it. He might not do it right away, but he's going to follow suit. You're going to see him catching on. He's not eating his broccoli, but he sees us doing it. Maybe he'll eat it. It might take him some time, but he's going to do what we do.
I always say kids don't learn, they absorb.
Yes. They're sponges.
They're sponges.
Yes.
It's that value of association. They don't learn with their ears, they learn with their eyes.
Yeah.
They see the hypocrisy of your absolutely audacious ability to say one thing and act in a completely different way.
And they call you out.
And it is sad, isn't it? Because it's like we're so comfortable lying to ourselves. And we're such good salespeople.
Yeah.
We can make a million excuses as to why we didn't do the thing and why everything else was a bigger priority and the universe was against us or our boss didn't let us. And we just apportion that blame out. We like pointing fingers. We don't like pointing thumbs.
Yep.
But like you say, when you have a child, and it was the same for me, my youngest is 12, and the idea of lying to her, it was too big of a pill to swallow.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, we're done with the bullshit.
Yeah.
We're done with it. But also, the podcast has helped. Like you said, who wants to read a book on thermography? Yeah, not really. But if I know I'm speaking to Andy this week,
you're going to read that book.
I'm going to read that shit.
Yep.
Or I'm at least going to give it a cursory glance
Exactly.
so that I don't embarrass myself. It's been one of the best. The podcast is like a secret university. It forces me to read the thing and do the thing because it's part of my personal identity. I'm like, well, I am a consummate professional. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to be, I was actually late for our meeting today, but that was kind of a child thing. But I'm going to hold myself to that level, and I'm going to be prepared for it. So I think, like you say, having kids is a great, but that kind of unconsciously, we're sort of suggesting there that unless you have kids, you're not going to be able to achieve this. So for people that are really young in their career and perhaps don't yet have children, maybe they're single, how do you think they can develop it?
Getting a mentor. I think they need to get a mentor, but they also need to also sit down and think about what they want, where they want to go over the next so many years, so many days, weeks, what they want to accomplish, and try to make a game plan for themselves, planning out their career, planning out their success, what they want to do in their life. I think that younger firefighters need to understand that they have to, it's not just the glitz and glamour of becoming a firefighter, but understanding where they want to succeed in their career and how they want to do it. And I think that helps them develop a sense of discipline and utilize what they've already learned in their prior areas. Whatever they've done, they played sports, whatever, like utilize those areas to help you, because that's going to help you build discipline. That's where I developed a lot of it as well. So that's something I think is a good factor behind it.
It's building discipline in those small bits as well, isn't it? I see in the discipline firefighter element of the book, it talks about taking pride in every element of his or her job.
Yes.
It's not just down to the physicality and the fitness elements. That should be the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy bit. A lot of people might enjoy that bit. But it's about keeping the gear clean, showing up on parade, uniform pressed and ready to go. Staying up to date with the outcome reports, with the debriefs of the line of duty deaths, understanding the whys behind it, keeping everything fueled and 100% ready to go. I think those elements are the micros. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We can deal with the macros. Do I turn up on time? Yeah. Am I fit and strong? Yeah. And even some people don't be achieving those. But I think when you get down to that granularity, you can start to create some really, really useful metrics. When people say, I want to be more disciplined. Okay, well then make it micro, and pick one element that you're going to discipline yourself for the next 30 days.
Yep.
Take us on to firematics, because like I said before, this element might be a little bit foreign to people. And I love the way it was written in the book. And I think, again, it's a very sticky term that we could probably start embedding our side.
So firematics isn't a term I developed. A mentor of mine, an old past retired chief, he said this to me many years ago when he was training me on some stuff. He said, firematics. And I'm like, what the hell is firematics? So he's like, it's basically everything we do as firefighters. It is the job. It's not fitness. It's not whatever else. Pride. It's the job. It's what we do. It's our objectives to our operations. And that's what I truly believe. If you don't have those areas, which is building construction, number one, there's a book, Francis Brannigan. He wrote a book on building construction and said, it is your enemy. The building is your enemy, not the fire. So if you don't understand the building, you don't understand how fire, now go into fire behavior, number two, how that's going to react in a building. Each building has its pros and cons of how fire behaves and what it's going to do. Some are more prone to collapse. Some are prone to higher heat, and some have large fire spread. So understanding that is understanding your enemy. It's like anything else. You have to understand what you're going into
I think that's the thing we've really failed at in the UK. That's the first thing I think that was really dropped off the syllabus as we expanded out into more rescue operations, technical elements of rope rescue and animal rescue and all this sort of stuff. Unless people are studying for IFE, Institute of Fire Engineers exams, they don't do a lot of look into building construction. I mean, Brent Brooks, a high-rise expert, we had him on recently, and he said exactly the same in a similar capacity where it was like, these buildings are designed to have fires in them. So if something's going wrong, that's because the building is your enemy, and people will be able to relate this to the failures of the construction elements and the governance of the building at Grenfell as an example. The building was set up to fail, not maliciously, but just through a series of political shortcuts and construction savings and a lack of alignment to updated procedures and legal requirements effectively. The building became our enemy because fire. Carol Lambert is a great guest that we had on, a fantastic fire behavior instructor, and he's also a very intelligent man. And he was like, fire is just chemistry and physics. I'm sorry, we're very romantic about it, but it is just chemistry and physics. Okay, it's actually, it's complex, but it's much more simple than we talk about it in a very romantic sense. And if you can understand, not even structural engineering, but if you can understand building materials, archways, steel, cubical expansion and the failure points of different elements, panels, boarding, the way that sacrificial wood works, and all of these elements, they're almost like railings or landmarks that you can grab hold of in the uncertainty and the fog of war when you're in those firefighting elements, when you're in structural firefighting. If you have those elements, you actually know what you're looking at, because like you say, the fire is not something we shouldn't have expected. These buildings were designed to sustain that. They should hold it within the compartment of origin. If it's failing, it's because the building is your enemy. I love the way you put that.
Yeah. And I look at that and I say, well, if you know the building, you know fire behavior, well, reading smoke is going to help you as well determine everything. From there, you do your size ups. You have your pre-incident size up, which is basic runs, basic fire alarm activations, also pre-planning. It's all part of your first pre-incident size up, which drives into going on calls. You're still sizing up. You're always sizing up the opponent. Your opponent is your building, like I said. When you get into that incident size up, that's when you're going to start putting those factors in. Okay, I have this structure. In our case, we have 5 different types of structures in the American Fire Service. We have this type of structure. We have this type of occupancy, blah, 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 hazardous materials, whatever else. And you're going to start looking at that, and you're putting your game plan together for when you arrive. And then when you arrive, you're going to take all those notions you had, and you're going to say, okay, now it's live. Now we have fire. Now I have to figure out what to do based on dry elements that I was given and see if my bias and my assumptions are now correct. And putting it together, developing my outcome, which is going to develop critical thinking for your situational and strategic decision making that you're going to have now. Which put that into play. When you finish it up, you're still doing the size up. You're never done sizing up a structure. You're done. Even the incident commander sizing up.
You're hitting a moving target
always,
all the time.
You're always.
Yeah.
You put people in a building. It's like extricating a car. Anytime you cut a piece of a car, you have to restabilize. Anytime you go into a building, it's now doing the same thing. You have to keep adjusting to what's going on.
Well, that always echoes me back to Professor Michael Reich with the whole smoke curtain and smoke cloak, which I know has made its way internationally eventually now. The irony is, when we start interacting with that building, we compromise the compartmentation because we open doors. Yeah. We open doors, we open windows, we try and control the ventilation profile of that building, but we're immediately, the first thing we do is we cause it to fail. I mean, it started to fail on its own, but we almost have to break it to fix it. Yep. Because we open doors, we smash things open, and then it's like you've let the tiger out the cage. So you need to continually interact with it. You need to keep reading the smoke. You need to keep seeing if your intended actions, your desired outcome is actually what you're getting, and then go through that cyclic situational awareness of plan, do, check, act, that cyclic element of situational awareness, because you're always hitting that moving target.
Always. And at the same time, you're always going to understand cutting off the flow path, knowing where the flow path is, what's happening with that, getting into the science behind all that. And you can't do that without having an understanding of what the company operations are going to happen on the scene. You know, you don't have to be an expert in truck operations, engine company operations, but you have to understand what their jobs are there for and how to utilize them, more so than what they're doing, but how to utilize them in their best capacity for that incident. And that's why I think that's the end of firematics, is understanding the operations of the job to know where you're putting your players on that chessboard.
And there's lots of really small ways to do this. People think you need massive training departments. Yeah. I use YouTube around the table a lot with my crews. Yeah. And I start with a very simple question. We'll put a little video up on the board, 10 seconds, and I'll just go, right, is that fuel controlled or ventilation controlled? What sort of fire are we looking at? And the first answer, it's a house fire. Yeah. But is it fuel controlled or ventilation controlled?
Exactly.
Because that should immediately be, for me personally, your first indication, because that will then should lead you into your tactical plan. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I only have some limited information because of the incredible experts I've spoken to. I'm not the best watch manager in the UK, watch commander. I'm not the best firefighter. But I'm humble enough to, when I speak to these experts, you almost start to realize, and even when I read your book, you know, there's several nuggets that I took away from that where I'm like, oh wow, I'm becoming acutely aware of how oblivious I was before. I was just doing a copy and paste. I was just running a script. Right. No matter what the building showed me, I was still doing the same thing. Yep. And that wasn't the reactive dynamic firefighter that I believed myself to be. I was just running a script.
Absolutely.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drillbook, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, knots and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to Jessup, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show. There's a couple of fantastic acronyms that you've got in the book that people won't be familiar with. We're going to drop these, and these sit within the element we've just been discussing around firematics. So I'm conscious of our time together, but I will put this in there because there's a Love Is You, which UK audiences won't be familiar with. And then we've obviously got the Below Principle, around building extent fire life hazard documented water. And we love an acronym, don't we? Oh, acronyms and mnemonics seem to be the principles of the fire service.
They love them.
Take me to situational awareness, brother.
Sure. All right. So situational awareness is basically, you can't have situational awareness if you do not understand fire behavior, fire building construction. You don't understand everything that we've talked about. You can't understand it, because how can you be situational aware in something that you know nothing about? You might know something's wrong, but you won't know how to identify it, what's really happening. And that's where you have to have that understanding of, you have to be able to perceive something, you have to predict something, and you have to understand it. And without having and that's what builds situational awareness. It starts with your discipline, your leadership of yourself, to learn, to educate, to train, focusing on those areas, giving yourself time to focus on the building construction, learn it, understand it, and so forth with the rest of the firematics. So when you get into building construction, to situational awareness, you think about this. Ventilation, or you're in a fire, and this is a situation that happened to me. I was a nozzleman on a fire, and I didn't know. I'm hitting a fire. I'm hitting a fire in a kitchen. The soffits are starting to go above the cabinets. And I'm like, oh, wow, it's getting really hot in here, But me, not as experienced at the time, understand what's really going on, I couldn't read the fire. I didn't read the flyer because I didn't know what I was doing. I was young. And my lieutenant, it's in the book, taps on my shoulder. We got to go. I'm like, why? The rollover. I wasn't able to identify the situation at hand was all particles of combustion were coming to his ignition source. And this room was going to flash any moment. I was still thinking, I got time. I didn't have time. We had to get out. Did I catch it? Did I get caught in a flashover? No, I got out. But understanding that and understanding how to handle that, you couldn't do that if you didn't understand building, construction, and fire behavior. You couldn't be situation aware. Could not be to understand that at that moment.
I think that's what petrifies people in the UK so much at the minute. We're hemorrhaging skill sets. We're hemorrhaging experience, brother. We are going through a very strange period of time where we're at that sort of 30-year point where we're having a lot of retirement. A lot of people are leaving. A lot of new people are coming in. You turn around, look on the back of the truck, and there's a collective 5 or 6 years of experience. That's why I think the work that you do and these podcasts and the book are so valuable now, because a lot of that experience is walking out the door. And if we don't start capturing it in audible time capsules or writing it down and encouraging people to digest it and take it forward, because realistically, yes, building construction is changing, the materials are changing, some of the equipment's changing, but a lot of that experiential learning of the deployment of these tactical tools is really what we need to hold on to. Because that's that, he's already spoken about mentorship and that building of situational awareness. That's only built over time. It's the whole analogy of, you have like 1,000 blankets and they've all got holes in them. The line of duty death happens when they all line up and that person is oblivious to those 17 things that are happening because they just don't have that situational awareness. They haven't had that experiential learning. If you weren't in that building with someone with a greater level of experiential knowledge than you could have become one of those statistics.
Yeah, it's a domino effect at the same time as well. And I look at situational awareness, it could be for anything. It could be ventilation. It could be air management, not understanding your crew. Crew integrity, situational awareness is big as well. If you're not trained together, not building that bond together, you're not learning with each other, and you're not going to understand a person's tendencies, their strengths, their weaknesses, when they're having an off day, when they're having a great day. You're not going to understand that. Some people can mask it well, but I put in a book about air management, and if you train on air management and do different time simulations, and you go into a building, and that one guy can usually make, in a smoke-filled environment under certain conditions, simulated 5 minutes, he's in there and he has a half a tank or 3/4 of a tank. You get in there and same scenario, and now he has a half a tank and he's sucking wind. Something's wrong. There's situation aware telling me this might not be the best opportunity for you to be here. This might not be your situation. You might have to come out. If you have a 4-man crew, you might have to do a 2 in, 2 out. Or we might have to figure something out if it's a smaller staff that day. But those are things you have to understand outside of situational awareness of the situation, situational awareness of your manpower.
Adaptable.
Yes.
Adaptability is one of the most underappreciated skill sets, I think. It's the old element of, the future belongs to the learner.
Yes.
Those who are married to the past and have lost that element of neuroplasticity, that openness to change. And again, you spoke earlier around people will become complacent. People park. They, for whatever reasons, and a million different ones, people feel like I'm an adult now. I've done 10, 15 years on the trucks, whatever it might be. And we lull ourselves into a false sense of security. How do you encourage and embrace adaptability and that kind of eternal student mindset?
Well, I try to think about different things. It's about, I try to tell people to be adaptable is you have to, you can't forget the past, right? You can't forget what happened. You have to learn from the past because you're only as good as you are right now. What happened in the past happened. You're only as good as right now. You're only as good, not even as your last fire, as you're right now. The greatest thing about baseball is you could be a 300 hitter. You can go 3 for 10 at the plate, and you're a 300 hitter, and that could seem like the worst thing in the world, having 3 hits and your 10 at bats. but you still have a good average, and I think about being adaptable is also understanding that you look at professional athletes, and I look at this a lot. And I look at guys like I always use the Tom Brady analogy, but I'm going to go to one of my favorite footballers, as you guys call him, David Beckham. He is one of my favorite football players of all time. Outside of Del Piero of Juventus, he is my favorite.
Still with Beckham, heavily loved in the UK. One of the few people, he had a little issue in a World Cup once, but I would argue he is loved.
But you think about
across the UK.
Talk about that. Think about what happened. You think about the adaptability after he did that. He adapted. He pivoted. He knew it was a mistake, and he knew I have to get better. This is not about me. It's about my team. It's about my country, because he truly loves representing England and the national team. So he adapted to, I made a mistake. I owned up to it. And in the world of firefighting, it's the same mentality. What you did yesterday, right, wrong, or indifferent, is not going to make you do anything for you today unless you decide to say, listen, I got to either change my mindset, change my attitude, get better, or get off the pot. And that's what adaptability is.
Shit or get off the pot.
Get off the pot.
I love that one.
At the end of the day.
You give a lovely little pivot because you speak about change in the book, and it is a very emotive thing, isn't it? Change almost has an underlying accusation that what you're doing is wrong.
Yes.
But I love how you reflect on it and offer the pivot of evolution or transformation, because they almost have more optimistic, positive connotations, do they? Yes. To them, sorry. The idea of evolving is getting better. The idea of transforming, Nick, you went through a transformation. But realistically, they're all elements of change.
They are.
But I think that was a lovely pivot. I just wanted to ask you to double click on that a little bit, because it's something that is kind of snuck in halfway through the book. And I'm not saying you undersold it, but I'm like, that stood out to me.
Well, I was always told in high school, my English teachers always said to me, you have a good connotation with words. You can understand negative connotations and positive connotations. It's always stuck with me in my mind. So I wanted to kind of put that in there to say, firefighters hate change and they hate the status quo. And nobody likes change. But if I evolved, I'm not really doing the same thing. I'm not really doing the same thing. I'm evolving to something better. I'm making myself better. And I'm changing my habits, changing my mentality, changing my diet, changing my work ethic. But I'm also evolving it. I'm getting better at it. So it's evolving, but it's also changing. Because it's not the same as it was yesterday as it is today. And that's how you adapt.
Have you seen you see a butterfly sat on one side of the table and you see a caterpillar sat on the other side of the table, and the caterpillar's like, dude, you've changed. And he's like, yeah, I'm supposed to. We're all supposed to, because everything is changing around us, isn't it?
Yep.
I always say there's no such thing as standing still. You're not standing still, because if you're standing still, you're going backwards, because everything is continuing to change.
Yeah.
You've got to embrace that. You will be left behind. You will be left behind. And you end up trying to do is surrounding yourself with other people who have chosen to deny evolution, have chosen to deny transformation, chosen to deny that the world is constantly evolving around us. And when you're around people like you, it can probably be a little bit uncomfortable, because you're shining a big uncomfortable light, not maliciously, but you keep leaning in. You keep looking for that evolution, for that transformation, for that change, for that personal development. And that can make people feel very uncomfortable. Like when you're having these conversations with people, with members of the team, members of the crew, and encouraging that evolution or that transformation, how do you do it without it feeling like an accusation?
I do. I basically we had something the other day, and it's a simple task. We were doing something on training, and we make our firehouse into scenarios. I usually do that a lot. So built a scenario in the house and in our bay, and went through it. And one of the officers come, and I said, hey man, what's going on? Like, tell me about what happened. And after the scenario was over, he's like, well, I said, we went in, we split the team into 4-man crew. We split them into two crews of 2. And we did a search on the first floor, went up the stairs and put the fire on. We simulated fire on the second floor and everything. And I said, yeah, but did you forget something? I didn't forget anything. This is how we always done it. This is how we always were trained to do this. Okay, did you forget something? No, I didn't forget anything. This is how I'm always trained. Did you forget to bring the thermal imaging camera? Well, why would I need that? We went through the whole process of this, and then he starts talking about he took a class. He took this class, talked about thermal imaging, and I said, yes, I know you did. And you have to be able to, your mindset needs to come from, you took this class, and what did they drill in that class? Take it off the rig. Your mindset has to change now. That it's not just taking things off the rig during calls. It's taking it off during training. It's in practice. The more you practice the change or the addition or whatever it is, if you practice it, now it becomes part of you. And that's how I kind of make it where it's I'm not telling people they're right or wrong. I'm getting it out of them. I'm telling them, tell me what they think they did right, what they did wrong. And a good mentor of mine, that's how he still does it to me. And that's how I kind of take them. What did you do right?
If you can come at it with curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's almost because otherwise you accidentally position yourself as in a position of authority.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to embarrass them or anything like that. But that's what I think of it as. I always say, help me understand. Yeah. Help me understand your thought process of what you took in with you. Because you know full well in your back of your mind they didn't take the thermal imaging camera. This is one of Andy's biggest frustrations is because people don't understand the technology. They don't take it off the truck. And it just gets left there all the time. And when he looks at the line of duty deaths and he looks at the incidents and then he downloads the software, it's they didn't use it. They didn't even take it off the truck. They didn't even use it. But yeah, coming from a place of curiosity, I always find as a team member, it's Simon Sinek's thing about trying to understand the why,
Yes.
Ask the why, ask the how. Don't go straight in with the, what did you forget? Because sometimes that can be and then they start rifling through. They almost might feel defensive. You've triggered that element within them where they're on the back foot.
Freezing up.
But yeah, I feel like coming at it with curiosity can sometimes be such a powerful tool for it. I want to be super respectful of your time. There's some great quotes and some great stuff within the book. And I say it's super, super short and super digestible. There's elements around adaptability, discipline, situational awareness, fit for duty, firematic knowledge, intelligence, and approachability that I think people could use as part of their almost daily tick list. And whatever that sort of maps over in your own life habits is a really, really useful place to start. Because otherwise I feel like people can read a book like yours, come away with a lot of motivation, but then unless they really translate that, because it is a universal tool for me. This is a tool that can be adapted globally because you don't actually go into any of the micro examples of kit or specifics around a department or anything like that. I think if you had have done that, it would have limited its growth. It would have limited its deployability. And I think as an example, people in the UK wouldn't have been able to access it because it was written for an American audience. But I feel like I don't know if it was conscious that you sidestepped that, but
it actually
it's a
was.
compliment to say that. I think it's very,
conscious.
very, was it? Okay. We can get, this has been one of my big frustrations and I have it with the podcast, to be honest with you. Americans tend to, with the greatest of respect, only talk to other Americans. And I'm you're screaming in an echo chamber. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until that I've learned the most from international guests, America, Germany, we've had people from Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and it's certainly masses and masses of Americans. Because otherwise, the real external sort of limitations of your own bias, you can't see that outer boundary because you're so deep in it.
Yes.
You don't realize you're in an echo chamber, especially with America, because America's so huge.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And it's different.
It's 52 countries.
Yeah, 50 of them. And everywhere in the country does something different, but at the same time, we're all doing the same thing. It's different, and how they attack things. And it's interesting. It's really interesting. We do it different up in the Northeast as opposed to the South.
I want to be respectful of your time. We're going to put a link in this. Sure. People can go and find the podcast. So we're going to put a link in here to all of the studies that you've been involved with. We're going to put a link into Station Talk. We're going to put a link into the 5-Tool Firefighter podcast. And of course, we're going to put a link into the 5-Tool Firefighter book. Is there any elements that you want us to circle back to? Is there any closing thoughts you want us to finish with before we kind of wrap it up, brother?
I always tell people at the end of it, take the time to think about what you want to do, what part of the service you want to learn. And don't make it your entire life, but make it that piece. Because oftentimes, if this is your whole identity, when it's not there, you have nothing. So if you read the book, utilize that in other parts of your life, not just in your fire service life, but utilize it in your family life, in your friends' life, in your activities. Just utilize it to make yourself better as a person, not as a firefighter.
I love that, because the fire service is and the fire department almost it's too big to change by yourself. It's the old, I think it comes from a religious context where it was like, I set out to change the world. And then God told me, focus on yourself. You change yourself and then the world around you will change. It's that element of position versus disposition. I say to people, you struggle to change your position in the world, but you can change your disposition, the way you feel about it, the way that you approach your day-to-day activities. And you're right. So many of these are actually character traits. They map over into your personal life. And you'll only be a firefighter for so long. You're more than just the thing you do. One day this will be over. And you want to be prepared for that. We have a lot of people going into retirement, and it is such a drop shock. It's like jumping off a moving train, because as you said, it becomes so much of our identity, and you're a lot more than just the thing you do. Beautiful. Nick, thanks so much for your time, mate.
Absolutely.
Send my love to the family. Thank you for the patience.
Thank you.
In for us being able to get this conversation.
Thank you.
I hope to be much better in the future when we circle back around, maybe in 6 months, and I'm on the chat.
Hey, I'm definitely down for that. And this time, I'll make sure my internet don't go out a couple of times. So fix it out there. Something's going on. The heat wave.
The Firefighters podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.